This row of Egyptian hieroglyphs represents what we've long considered the starting line of human history. For centuries, our understanding was that complex storytelling and structured writing began right here, with the great empires of antiquity. We see this same pattern in Mesopotamia. This clay tablet displays cuneiform script, humanity's earliest known recording system. Before these civilizations, human stories were spoken aloud, passing from generation to generation until they eventually faded away. But this site shatters that timeline. These massive stone pillars are arranged in precise circular rings at a complex called Göbekli Tepe. They were erected 12,000 years ago, long before the first cities or any known alphabet. The people who built this complex were hunter-gatherers. They had no books and no tablets. Yet they spent centuries carving a dense network of complex symbols and figures directly into these massive stones. Because the builders left no surviving text to define these shapes, archaeologists must interpret this site through the context and repetition of the carvings alone. The scale and consistency of these works suggest that these people were attempting to project their ideas across time, creating a permanent archive of the human mind. At first glance, the carvings appear to document the environmental realities of the ancient world. Many stones depict predators like scorpions and snakes, creatures that posed a daily threat to early foraging communities. But the specific animals are repeated with a frequency that suggests they held a shared symbolic meaning. Take the detailed fox carved into the side of this central pillar. Foxes appear more often than almost any other creature across the site, marking them as a central figure in the builder's worldview. Then there are the vultures. These birds are featured prominently across the entire site. In many ancient cultures, vultures were associated with death and the afterlife. This likely relates to the practice of sky burials, where the deceased were left exposed for scavenging birds. In this tradition, the vulture acts as the vehicle for the soul's journey. To the people of Gobekli Tepe, these birds were likely seen as messengers, crossing the boundary between the living world and the spiritual realm. These choices, the cunning fox, the dangerous scorpion, and the transporting vulture, show that these hunter-gatherers shared a sophisticated spiritual vocabulary long before the invention of the alphabet. But the symbols on the stone are only half the story. The physical shape of the pillars themselves reveals a much deeper layer of the builder's intent. Notice the low-relief carvings running down the narrow sides. These are human-like arms, descending to fingers that meet at the center. Just above the hands is a carved belt and loincloth. The builders intentionally designed these blocks to represent giant humanoid figures. These anatomical features transform the stones into enormous beings standing in a circle, monumental figures representing ancestors, spirits, or perhaps the first gods. By placing these figures at the center of the complex, the builders created the oldest known monumental representations of sacred beings in human history. When you map the placement of the animal totems directly onto these stone figures, a deliberate structure begins to emerge. This layout suggests a visual grammar. When specific animals are paired with humanoid pillars in a consistent sequence, they stop being isolated images and start functioning as a coherent message. This system of using visual signs to convey specific ideas functions as a proto-language. It allowed the builders to anchor their fleeting oral stories to a permanent stone record. Through this system, the builders ensured their complex mythology could be preserved and passed down when no other medium for recording knowledge existed. Gobekli Tepe operates as a frozen library. It stands as a record of the moment humanity began transferring its collective memory from speech into solid rock. However, the culture that carved these stones eventually vanished. The specific knowledge required to read their 12,000-year-old stories has been lost to time. Yet among the hundreds of carvings, one specific pillar stands out from all the rest, and it may document a very real physical event. This is Pillar 43, known as the Vulture Stone. It features a unique, dense cluster of symbols, most notably a large bird positioned over a sphere. Because of its highly specific arrangement of shapes, some researchers suspect this stone isn't telling a spiritual myth, but rather recording a cosmic disaster. Did the people of Gobekli Tepe use their stone language to warn future generations about a catastrophe they witnessed in the sky?